A sense of overriding futility is a vital part of the process. Embrace it. How's this son? And the moribund.
Pas bien la rouge.
Now we begin to put the asshole to the earth.
Man, what the fuck y'all want me to do? Kill the president? Fuck his wife or something? Or invade some fucking country?
And Franklin.
Oh, nigga, don't hate me because I'm beautiful, nigga. Maybe you got rid of that old yee-yee ass haircut you got, you get some bitches on your dick. Better yet, maybe Tanisha will call your dog ass if she ever stop fucking with that brain surgeon or lawyer she fucking with, nigga.
Oh, I'm a legitimate businessman now, sister. I'm a CEO, an investor. I'm a Illuminati.
Tanisha.
I'm a fucking moron, nigga. You a phony fuck.
Hanging out with old men, ignoring your homies, acting all superior? Your mama will turn over in her grave, boy.
Janet Hubert.
Yo, motherfucker, I know little niggas like you been turned out on the daily. Talking about being hit.
A lot of Johnsons,
I swear, man, you ain't got no motherfucking respect.
Tell you what, my boy, you tell me exactly what you want, and I will very carefully explain to you why it cannot be.
Hey, cowboy, you mind that I fucked your old lady? Sorry, what was that?
Stephen Hogg.
No, you don't mind? Oh, because you're a dead man? And the only sentient part you left is this little bit of brain and the gristle on the end of my boot? Well, thank you very much, cowboy.
Such a good word.
Independent thinker, living out here away from the man.
Oh, Trevor, what have you got all over yourself? You're all red. You got syrup?
Love these guys.
I ain't got a very big penis. Some girls laugh when they look at it.
Jimmy Ray Bennett.
I told you, I got a career. I don't need this.
Claire Burns.
Crap.
There was a
Jake Lates.
Eastern European guy making moves in Liberty City. He went quiet.
Interesting voice.
Trevor? If that fruitcake realizes, finds out you're alive, you are D-O-N-E fucked.
I like that
My
voice too.
sources are convinced there's a plot in international affairs, the agency, and they're
The
using
cough.
this facility to make a serious nerve tuck.
The fucking FBI
They
cop.
plan in their mind-blowing insanity to let a major terrorist base on a metropolitan area
asshole
so they
FBI
can
cop.
continue to get funding. Nothing increases funding for fighting terrorism more than successful acts of terrorism.
The way I see things, you and me and Michael, we're friends now. Good friends. Such good friends.
Good shit.
That we will make a great effort to avoid one another.
Good fucking shit. Possible remnants of planet Thea found inside of Earth. Was Thea a planet? But it was just a moon.
Hello, wonderful person. This is
Y'all know about this? You fucking believe Earth was made in 10 days like some fuck?
Didnt, and today we're going to be talking about the object known as Thea that approximately 4.5 billion years ago collided with planet Earth, eventually resulting in the formation of our beautiful moon. And despite this being a pretty well accepted idea today, there are still a lot of questions about this whole scenario. For example,
it's the most plausible
the rest
theory,
of Thea?
by the
Did
way.
it actually
Most plausible.
and get absorbed into Earth, or did some of it escape into some other area of our solar system? And if so, where exactly is it located today? And so in this video, we're actually going to be discussing a very interesting proposition that makes a lot of sense. Thea is indeed inside our planet Earth, and it actually explains one of the phenomena we have inside our planet that we've discovered a few years ago, but that has since been sort of mysterious and extremely difficult to explain because it does create a lot of really unusual properties on our planet. The objects known as LLSVPs, also known as Large Low Shear Velocity Provinces. But let's go back in time approximately 4.5 billion years ago and start with the idea of Theia. So today a lot of scientists believe that Theia was most likely in a very similar orbit to planet Earth for at least a few million years, possibly even 100 million years.
How does the moon exist?
Right here,
well, it's right here.
The so-called L5 Lagrange point, which are the stable orbital points where you can place a satellite, for example, and it's going to stay there without falling into the sun or falling back to planet Earth. And as a matter of fact, several satellites today are in those points. And in these Lagrange points, we also usually discover a lot of different Trojans, like the ones that Jupiter has, and so finding a large massive object there is not unusual. But it's still quite easy for an object in a Lagrange point to lose stability and to eventually start moving around the orbit and possibly even collide with one of the other objects.
I'm not gonna necessarily fucking re-explain something I've explained before on this fucking show, right? You can look it up. You have the internet. You're looking at me right now. You can get Tia. You can get fucking Anton. You can get my show. Maybe. But if you ask a question, I'll do my best to re-explain it. All you have to do is ask a question in the chat. Pretty simple, right? If you care, you ask.
So, for example, for satellites, we do need to
go ask Google if you don't care about me. Go ask
and
Google.
And so, approximately 4.5 billion years ago, the scientists believed that this is exactly what happened to Theia and to planet Earth. Theia itself being roughly the same size as planet Mars, and Earth being a little smaller than it is today, with the impact itself first creating a kind of a disk of debris, which then slowly coalesced, creating the moon. But this is a somewhat simplified picture, and you might already see a problem here. The mass and size of Theia is a lot larger than our own moon. So where's the rest of this object? At the same time, how certain are we that this is exactly how the moon was created? What other proof do we possibly have showing us that this so-called collision occurred approximately 4.5 billion years ago? And even though the direct evidence for this event is a little bit difficult to find, over the past year, scientists did discover a few hints suggesting that this collision did indeed occur, but more importantly that Theia chunks, those leftovers of Theia, are actually still around. And more specifically that those Theia chunks did not disappear, they did not go into...
I guess some people would like to say, like, how in the world do you even come up with such a theory? You know, and it's very simple. Learn physics. Physics only has a few laws, to be frank. There are only a few laws in this universe that guide it and all that it wants to do. And of course, there are really high experiments with really high pressure, right, going on that we're not sure about what's going on right there. But most other events are simply guided by the laws of physics. Simply. And so when we see two objects going around one another, like Earth and Moon, we don't really think about aliens, right? We think about the fact that there is gravity holding them together, right? And that these two objects came from somewhere. They came from somewhere. Where did they come from? Right? We have an idea how the Earth was made. It was made with the other planets. So all the planets, there's 9, right? Nobody came in and fucking put them here. They just formed. Because the laws of physics say that objects, after millions, hundreds of millions of years or whatever, around a sun which gravitates, you know, matter around it, will start to form planets, right? So it's fucking simple. But it wouldn't make a moon. These objects are, like Anton said, things that would come a little further from the initial rings and would converge towards the sun and then get grabbed by one of the planets. And things like this can happen. They can collide. Because we're trying to explain why the moon and the Earth have the same kind of ground. Right? And if they're formed like other planets are outside the fucking anywhere in the ring, every planet has different ground, right? It has different different matter that has to do with their weight and the gravity of billions of years ago, holding that matter together and forming it into planets, right? So why does the moon has the same fucking ground as Earth? And so this is one of the theories that matches with reality, right? Gaia and Theia.
To the other parts of the solar system, they stayed on planet Earth and sunk to the bottom. And as you probably guessed by now, those chunks are what you see right here on the screen.
This is the remnants that he is basing his video on. This is new information for me. I don't know what I'm looking at. This is very interesting.
They are indeed those LSVPs that scientists discovered a few years back. Now, in case you don't really know, these LSVPs were discovered by using this technique known as seismic tomography. And the way the technique works is by listening to different earthquake waves and the speed of propagation of those waves, and then...
By the way, this here, I know, it's not necessarily like physics. Well, using the meter and all that, that certainly uses some physics, but that's like geology or geography. You know, it's a branch of science.
Comparing the waves, forming the overall picture of what the waves most likely pass through. By using this technique, the scientists can usually very accurately see what happens inside planet Earth and also detect various objects that would be otherwise invisible to us. And so by using seismic tomography, long ago the scientists discovered these unusual formations inside our planet. And unfortunately, even today, it's not entirely clear how they were formed. But the original explanation was that they were more likely to be possibly ancient continents that sunk to the bottom of the planet. But that proposition doesn't really explain a lot of things, especially because why is it that these continents sunk but the other ones stayed on the surface? At the same time, several studies that were analyzing volcanic rocks in Iceland identified some of the samples resembling these LSVPs and were able to measure their density, discovering that their density was about 2 to 3% more dense than mantle of our planet. And obviously, because this stuff is more dense, it would sink to the bottom, depositing on top of the outer core. Interestingly, 2 of these blobs located beneath Africa have been implicated in the formation of the so-called South Atlantic anomaly, which is this relatively large magnetic hole present in the region around South America, where the magnetic field becomes so weak that even satellites passing through here do have a tendency to malfunction or even become damaged. And so the scientists today think that this part right here very likely formed because of the LSVPs present in the area.
Right here. No, that's Africa.
Right here. So basically we have these very mysterious
wait, what?
inside our
here?
Planet,
I don't think we're seeing the right thing here, Anton, to be frank.
Whose origin is somewhat difficult to explain. But what is certain,
I think whoever made this fucking bubble here knows what they're doing. And, you know, this patch is under fucking Australia, and this thing is really under Africa.
For a very long time.
Right, and there's nothing under South America. But I don't think that this thing actually explains. It cannot explain what's going on in South Africa, as we don't see any element to explain such a thing, a phenomenon. Thank you.
Previously, that study that discovered these rocks in Iceland also discovered.
Next graph.
That these mantelpieces were extremely old, possibly even older than the moon itself. And if we find a piece that's older than the moon, it only suggests one thing. It most likely came from that mysterious Theia. At least that's the implication that the scientists, whose paper you can find in the description, make after a relatively thorough analysis. The main idea, of course, being the fact that after the moon was born, the chunks of Theia eventually stayed inside our planet and sunk to the bottom, forming these LSVPs, and the remnants of Theia are still there today. Which of course would explain why we don't see Theia orbiting somewhere in the solar system, and why we don't actually have any asteroids or any meteorites landing on the planet that might have been from Theia.
The other amazing thing of this theory is that it explains where the water comes from on Earth. It theorizes that Theia, which was made outside the solar system, then things outside the solar system somehow have more like fucking water in them. Maybe because it's light. I don't fucking know really. But objects that collide, objects that enter solar systems often have a lot of water. And some people theorize that Theia had a lot of water, and that water was given to Earth. And so that's where the water comes from, which is quite a beautiful love story, in my opinion. It's a beautiful love story.
Originally. And there's quite a lot of good evidence that the scientists do provide in this paper. So, for example, we know that
that's the leading
to combine the mass of LSVPs, which is about 2 to maybe 6% of mass of planet Earth, and add them to the mass of the moon, this does give us the average value for the prediction of the total mass of what Theia was probably like as well. At the same time, the predicted value for the density of Theia does actually come really close to the total value of density we discover inside of those LSVPs. The scientists today believe Theia was slightly denser, possibly about 2 to 3% denser than planet Earth. And so the explanation presented in the paper is that, well, once you combine Theia and the early Earth, you'll get these chunks of Theia stuck inside of the mantle.
Now, all of this can be wrong. I don't think I'd be a good scientist unless I would say that. You know, of course, there could be little green men that came over and fucking threw a fucking moon at our planet, you know, and fucking made the Earth and crafted the Earth. And to be frank, that's a possibility. But honestly, that is so high up there in the sense that one would believe that, because the probability of that being so is extremely low. Because you're saying that these folks would have spent their time crafting a planet, right? First off, that was quite some time ago, right? And I don't think there was intelligent life at that time, but that's my theory. Yeah, so basically you're saying that we are, or that this is the planet that some fucking fuckeries happened on, right? It's just so out of fucking control. Like basic physics, basic knowledge of how the universe works can explain our planet and our solar system. I don't need another fucking element that makes no fucking sense, right? On top of that, like a god or some green people, okay? I don't need that at all to explain what we are, who we are, where we come from, and where all this is going. I don't, right?
Planet Earth, which will eventually solidify and form the regions that do resemble LSVPs that we find on the bottom of the mantle of our
absolutely
planet.
unnecessary.
Because denser material usually sinks to the bottom. That's basically why the LSVPs were formed.
And absolutely
Theia's
trash
mantle
right
was
now.
just denser to begin with. With these pieces here,
we know better.
Some sort of an iron-rich and possibly highly dense mantle, slightly more iron-rich than the mantle of planet Earth. And all of this also connects to a lot of discoveries that
Earth was not made in 10 days 2,000 years ago. I don't care what you say. No evidence supports that. Actually, all evidence rejects that. Also,
suggested that
you can't believe, right, that something interfered with the development of this planet without having some kind of proof. And we have no evidence that supports that idea either. In fact, all evidence points to a very natural process.
These really ancient LSVPs have approximately a similar age to the original impact with Theia. With all of these studies,
This is the natural process.
It's a pretty clear picture of what probably happened about.
We don't need humans, we don't need intelligence, we don't need anything. The laws of the universe, or simply the way it works, does everything by itself.
4.5 billion years ago. So let's try to summarize. We had two objects in the same orbit, with one of the objects becoming destabilized and eventually colliding with planet Earth. With the collision itself creating quite a lot of debris orbiting around the planet,